Alright everybody, welcome to another edition of In Between Days. My name, as always, is Jason, and I've been watching Days of Our Lives my entire natural born life, and maybe a little bit before then. So we're going to talk a little bit about Monday and Tuesday. Both days were action-packed, and so we're going to get right into things. Monday starts off with Steve and Jack and Kayla, and Jack is explaining to them about how Gwen and Xander have been staying in the Horton house, which has been kind of arguably the comedy portion of the show lately, although there's some serious business going on in there, and we'll get into that. Xander questions Gwen about the pills. He's catching on to things. He definitely catches on faster than that Brady Black ever would. Xander seems to be a little bit quicker to figure things out lately. Next we have Roman admitting to Nicole that Eric has been away far too long as they have a conversation in the Brady pub. He admits to her that it's not right and that it's unfair. And the very next thing we see is Rafe entering, so there's a little bit of a setup, and obviously there's a triangle going on there, and that will develop more this week. Triangle going on with Rafe, Nicole, and Ava. Next we see Sammy thinking back to her encounter with Nicole, and she decides in the present to take action. Ava overhears Sammy talking to herself, and Sammy asks Ava, is that a threat? Because Sammy is telling herself that she is going to expose Nicole no matter what, whatever it takes. She is convinced that Nicole has cheated on her brother Eric. She happens to be right, but she also happens to be a hypocrite because both Sammy and EJ, for that matter, have cheated on each other. EJ cheated on Sammy with Abigail, played at the time by Kate Mancy. And you'll have to excuse me for a brief moment. The whole paper has flown off the desk. So we are in real time going to do this. Alright. Like sands through the hourglass, so were the days of our lives. Things happen. I think I'll just keep that in there because it's a little bit funny. So we have been talking about the whole love triangle with Rafe, Sammy, and Ava. And we've been talking about how Sammy has cheated on EJ in the past with Abby, and I think she cheated on Lucas with EJ. Anyways, there's a lot of hypocrisy going on there. We got a little bit offside to the track. So after the day's opening credits on Monday, we see Allie and Chanel talking about Sweet Bits, which is their new little endeavor that Chanel came up with to sell donuts, and we get more of, I don't know if you heard my last episode, but we talked a little bit about the controversial Alice's Donuts. Chanel essentially wants to get that recipe for her new business, whereas it's been a Horton family traditional secret recipe for at least 4, maybe 5 decades. It is arguably Allie's legacy because she is named Alice Caroline Horton. Allie is a very interesting character because very few characters are Brady and Horton. You have to understand that, and that's a huge thing. So will she become the one to sort of take these Alice Horton donuts to the next level? A lot of people out there don't want to see that. I don't really want to see that. It was growing on me because I see the angle where it is her legacy, and I guess we'll have to figure out what happens to Sweet Bits. I don't think Sweet Bits is going to become a thing, but we'll get to that a little bit later, and that has to do with Paulina. Ava runs into Sammy outside the hotel there, and this comes back from their "is that a threat" moment when Ava asks Sammy, "Is that a threat? Are you..." Or sorry, Sammy asks Ava, "Is that a threat? Are you threatening me?" In terms of whether or not she goes after Nicole. And Ava is asking Sammy to let it go. Nicole's been through enough. Sammy's being the usual hypocrite, as we talked about, because she's done the same things. And Ava kind of calls her out. Don't you miss EJ? Don't you want to go back to your husband? Aren't you in a similar situation? Just let it go. We then get a Roman, Rafe, and Nicole scene where Roman's giving Rafe beer on the house, and Rafe says to Nicole that he knows about Nicole knowing that him and Ava have had relations and taken their relationship to the next level. So I think he wants to talk to her about that and let them know that they're friends no matter what and all that good stuff. Jack, Kayla, and Steve are in a scene, and they're talking about Gwen. Kayla doesn't trust Gwen. She's on Team Abby. That is more or less understandable, obviously. She's family with Abby. Abby was put through a lot by Gwen, and Steve and Kayla are not ready to trust Gwen, are not ready to believe she changed, are not ready to believe that she is no longer telling any lies. That's not getting over with Steve and Kayla. So Jack is in an awkward position, as usual, as he was in a similar way with Julie, who also is very skeptical that Gwen has changed in any way. We get a scene with Xander and Gwen, speaking of Gwen, at the Horton house, and Xander continues to question Gwen, demanding answers. Kayla, Steve, and Jack are still talking about all of that stuff with Gwen and Abby, and Jack essentially tells them that Abigail is not ready to come home. So we're going to have to see what happens with Abby if she ever does come home in the form of either actress. It could be the same Abby comes back. It could be after some time they bring in Kate Mansi again. They seem to swap the two Abigails in and out depending on what storyline they want to do and who would fit better and who's available. So it's just an interesting kind of thing they have there. Both actresses have their chemistry with Kaz. I don't know who Kaz is, but they both have chemistry with Chad. Easy for me to say. I do prefer Kate Mansi overall, but I don't want to get into any controversial who's better stuff. I do prefer Kate Mansi overall, but the other Abigail has had her moments as well, so no hate there. Anyways, where were we? Abigail's not ready to come home. Xander and Gwen are still talking. Gwen tries to give Xander this whole excuse that her mom was an addict, a drug addict. She had an awful upbringing, and she would never deal drugs. Xander may buy into some of that, but overall he doesn't buy into it as an excuse. He says something along the lines of, "That's quite the sob story." Nicole comes to Rafe next, and they're talking about custody of Duke. As soon as I hear the name Duke, I think of Duke Johnson. I'm a longtime Days of Our Lives fan, so it's very creepy rather, that they would name a doll after Duke. I know he's not actually named after Duke, but if the writers thought a little bit more, Duke was a character much along the lines of a Clyde Weston. He was the father of Jack and Steve and Adrian. He was an evil dad. He did evil things, awful things. Nicole had a father that was similar to that. Nicole had a father similar to Clyde Weston. Duke was very similar to Clyde Weston. So every time I hear the name Duke the Teddy Bear, it really bothers me, because once again, that was the name of Jack, Steve, and Adrian's evil father. Writers, that is very awkward. Let's see what else is going on besides this ridiculous custody battle over a teddy bear. Not really a battle, just a friendly shared custody battle that Rafe and Nicole have over a teddy bear. I wonder how they'll explain that to Eric when he comes back into town, but there's going to be other things that they're going to have to explain to Eric when he comes back into town, and we'll get all into that in just a minute. We're at the 9-minute mark, and we want to cover 2 whole episodes today, so let's see if we can keep going. Maybe we'll just do one at a time. We're going to have to make a judgment call an audible. So we're in about the middle of Monday, and I'm doing this a different way because the first few times I didn't really take any notes. I just winged it, I talked about what happened on the show, but not step by step like this. So I may next time, just briefly, I'm going to be very transparent with you. I think next time we'll just go through each story that's happening on Days, like one at a time. So I'll just do like the Steve, Jack, Kayla stuff and then the Xander stuff. But today we'll just keep going. So we are at about Sammy and Ava. That's continuing. Ava tries to offer an apology to Sammy for what Charlie did to Allie, and that's a huge moment where they actually do come to a mutual understanding, and Sammy does accept and appreciate the apology from Ava. It was a sincere apology, and Ava does explain to her the things that she wished she could have done differently, and that she wasn't there necessarily for Charlie a lot, and that Charlie was very troubled. So they do come to an understanding, at least for a moment there, over that, and they do realize that they're going to share a grandchild in the form of Henry. Trip and Allie are seen at, well, technically Nicole's place. I was going to say Allie's place, but it's technically Nicole's place where Allie is living. And I was thinking to myself, don't you just want Chanel to leave because she's there also? But Trip goes to leave instead until they start to tell him about the bakery. Sweet bits! So he stays. We go to Sammy and Ava wrapping things up, and Ava once again says, please leave Nicole alone. But Sammy is determined to expose Nicole for doing the things that Sammy does. Sammy just wants to prove that Nicole cheated on Eric. Eric is coming back to town. We know it's probably going to be for a brief time. We know they're probably going to just wrap that couple up. We can speculate that even though Rafe and Ava are together right now, that Rafe and Nicole will end up being a thing. I don't know where that leaves Ava, but I don't know how long Ava can stay as good Ava. I think we saw a little bit of foreshadowing either on Monday or Tuesday about that, when Jack and Kayla completely do not believe that Ava has changed, and they say that Rafe is old enough to take care of himself, but he is in for something. So what may happen, we can speculate for a moment, is that Rafe will end up with Nicole after some shenanigans, and Ava will be very upset at how that happens, why that happens, and she may become a little bit obsessed with Rafe the way she was with Steve. And if that's the case, then we've got some major problems to look out for. We're going to keep going. Rafe asks Nicole about Xander. Oh yes, that's right. So Rafe wants to know the deal with Xander. Rafe is not understanding why Nicole would offer Xander a job, given their past, given the fact that they were married because of blackmail and Xander had kept her away for so long and all of that stuff. Why in the world would Nicole give Xander a job unless he had some sort of blackmail on her? So Rafe is kind of, you know, he is the police commissioner, so the wheels are turning slowly. He's figuring out that Xander probably has something on Nicole, but what could that be? Well, we all know what that is. And then we go to Xander and Gwen speaking in the Horton house. Xander still wants answers. He wants her to explain why she has that large envelope of lots of painkillers in it. Jack comes in while they're fighting about it, and he makes an interesting comment. He says, this is not my home, or this is my home. Technically, it's kind of not. It's owned by Jennifer, the Horton house. You got Doug and Julie staying there. Jack's brought in a couple of stowaways, but I mean, that was kind of the idea of the Horton house, if you think about it. People that didn't have anywhere to go, they used to have a little part tacked onto the Horton house for just that thing. I don't know if that's still there, but maybe that's where everybody should be staying. But Jack comes in, he says, this is my home. I don't know why I keep saying that, but Jack comes in, he says, this is my home. It is not the Octagon, so cool it with the wrestling matches. Now, Jack, being the reporter that he is, I don't think he's a sports reporter, because the Octagon is not for wrestling. The Octagon is for mixed martial arts, and wrestling is usually done in a 4x4 ring, sometimes a 6-sided ring in Mexico, but that's a whole other story for a whole other day. And a whole other channel if we ever do that. Steve and Kayla. Steve tells Kayla about Rava, aka Rafe and Ava, and Ava's huge apology that she made. Steve and Kayla basically aren't buying into that bullshit, as I let you know earlier. Rafe and Nicole are continuing to talk in the pub. basically a friends no matter what conversation, and Rafe just comes out with it, and he asks Nicole, does Xander have something on you? Why are you offering him a job? What is going on? And that's when Ava enters. That's an awkward moment. Look, Nicole leaves to give them their time together. Rafe says we will continue this conversation at some other time. Easy for me to say, so that conversation does not get resolved at this time. Jack at the Horton house has to leave, and Xander, or at least he has to take a phone call. Xander doesn't expose Gwen at that time. Gwen begins to tell Xander the truth while under pressure, at least part of the truth, that she's being blackmailed to push these drugs and to get these drugs to where they have to go. Sammy and Nicole run into each other. Nicole says that she did have a room, and she produces a fake receipt. She keeps getting accused, but eventually she's going to show that there is proof that she did have a room. She charged it to Basic Black. Case closed, although later we find out that she just made a fake receipt. That probably wasn't a good idea. Nicole is about to get caught in a whole bunch of trouble, and it's not really looking good for Nicole right now. And if Sammy keeps being Sammy, Nicole is going to find herself in a lot of trouble, and we know eventually Eric's coming to town. But speaking of finding herself in a lot of trouble, Sammy may get that exact same karma when EJ shows up to town. It's not the EJ we all want it to be, so once again, I'm just shipping Lucas and Sammy. I think Lucas and Sammy have supposed to have been together from the beginning, but that's just me. Will is another character that's a Brady and a Horton. So just the fact that they have a son that's a Brady and a Horton, put Lucas and Sammy together. I loved that promo with the old footage. We've got Trip and Allie. He came to tell her about Jan. Pronouns pal, Trip. Trip came to tell Allie about Jan Spears killing Charlie. So that's a bit of closure for all of that. Rafe tells Ava about Jan, and Rafe tells Ava he wonders about Nicole and Xander, so he's still wanting those answers. And speaking of wanting answers, Xander also wants answers from Gwen, and Gwen said, I've told you everything, but I can't say who. Trust me, it's just going to be worse if I tell you. It's going to get Jack in trouble. Do you really want that? So they're going over all of that. Sammy and Nicole, again, are wrapping things up. Sammy sees the receipt, and she seems appeased for now, but she's not entirely convinced, and she's still going to be determined to prove that Nicole slept with Eric. We all know it. Allie and Trip talk about Henry, and they have a little bit of a kiss. Steve and Kayla, well, they have a little bit of a kiss, but I should say something very important is that Allie pulls away. She has flashbacks. She has memories about Charlie. It's very awkward for her, and Trip offers to leave and go home, but that's not what Allie wants. She just doesn't feel too comfortable for now. These past memories came up, and we'll get into that a little bit more because Allie goes to get some advice about it. Trip goes to get some advice about it. But all you need to know for now is they share a kiss. It's a little bit awkward. Steve and Kayla talk about what? I'm not sure what I put down there. But oh, well, they're just basically talking about different things, and I just have the thought, how long will Steve be just home, all domesticated, without having any mission to go on? He's holding his promise for probably the longest time ever. He's all the time promising Kayla, I'll stay home, I won't get into any more trouble, I won't go on any more missions, even though my job is with Black Patch and I'm a private investigator that might need to go around the world. I won't do that anymore. So he hasn't been on a mission in a long time, but I wouldn't mind seeing something thrown together for him to do. That's a little bit more than just staying at home with Kayla. What does Steve do lately? Just kind of plays dad to Trip. Allie and well, they are aging. I'm not asking John Black to go on any James Bond mission lately because they have him looking a little bit older lately, but Steve, come on, Steve needs something to do. We talked about Allie and Trip and her weird flashback. Gwen says to Xander, please let it go. Reva are contemplating Xander and Nicole still, and Ava's basically covering because Ava does know that Nicole, you know, cheated and on Eric and all of that. Sammy and Nicole, yeah, they just wrap things up with the receipt there, so Sammy goes away. But, you know, I don't think Nicole's mistake is going to go away. It seems like Eric will come back just to end their story. I think the intention is for Nicole to end up with Rafe. We talked about that a little bit before. A big question is what happens to Holly? Do we just see her with Nicole, or does she vanish off canvas with Eric? Brady is always talking about how much he loves Rachel and would do anything for Rachel, but if you remember, he's also got a child out there with Teresa that he never sees or talks about. So where's Tate? But I will give Days this. Normally it's weird because for long periods of time you don't see any of the kids. You wonder where they are. Are they in the attic with Max? Well, no. Not necessarily this time, because there is a pandemic going on, so it would be near impossible to have children on the actual set. I think that's why we're not seeing older characters as well very often, such as Victor and Maggie and Doug. We did see Doug briefly, and Doug just had a birthday, so that's how I'm going to wrap this one up, and we're just going to do another episode because this is a long one for some reason, so I'm not necessarily going to continue with this exact format. I do want to say happy birthday to Bill Hayes, Doug Williams, who turned 96, I believe, and is still kicking it. He's not just kicking it, he's acting on screen, so that's a huge accomplishment at 96. So congratulations and happy birthday to Days of Our Lives, and congratulations to Days of Our Lives on their 2-year renewal. I like to say that at the end. Follow me, like this video, share this video, and hit that notification bell if you want to be the very next person to hear all about my next video. So I said this video was going to be about Tuesday and Wednesday, but I think I'm just going to break them down. So that's your very detailed Monday episode of In Between Days. Chat and chow.